Splendid Sunday here for Hearthstone Grandmasters in Europe. The stage is set. It's top of the division versus bottom of the division. Bunny wants that win to try to chase down first place. Fino needs that win to stave off the last. And so we have our bans and our protections in. That Divine Shield around a class means it was protected prior and ineligible for ban. And so I imagine Fino has some choice thoughts right now for Bunnyhoppor as he's protected his own warrior, had his priest banned away. Fino has protected his priest and had his druid banned away in the series. And we've been seeing Bunnyhoppor protect shaman and ban shaman. Fino doesn't have shaman. And I'm thinking perhaps that's the kicker.
I think that does make a big difference. Yeah, I was about to bring up the point that Bunnyhoppor has been one of these guys who has been winning consistently, and he hasn't been on this protect priest strategy that, Fino said in our interview, and we've been kind of joking about it, but genuinely we do agree with the sentiments at the core is that protect priest, for as long as priest is as powerful as it is, should just be where you are. Just leave it on everyone else to try and come up with something more creative that can beat that, because so far no one really has been able to. However, Bunnyhoppor is kind of the spanner in the works on that, because he has been consistently protecting and banning shaman where available and has had incredible success. He's second position in his league with a game in hand on the guy above him, which is what he's about to play and try and prove that shaman dominance can come down over Fino.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this warrior deck that Bunnyhoppor's protected, and we talked about it yesterday, but there are some key things to note within this list. Number one, no Omega Assembly. So you're fighting pretty honestly through and through the game, even in the very late stages. 2 copies of Hecklebot in the deck list in order in some of the matchups where your opponent has critical cards that remain in the deck. Think about versus Malagos Druid, for instance.
Yep.
Sometimes you're able to pull a key minion from the deck and eliminate it, so that way it shreds a combo potential that your opponent has against Holy Wrath Paladin. Very similar style of feelings that presents. I really like the theory that was put into this deck, and I like what I'm looking at. A lot of the warrior builds, I see them and I go, how did they fit in all these cards? The answer is always something got cut. And in this case, it was Omega Assembly. It says, you know what, warrior's strong enough, it's got enough value, let's play for some stronger impact.
Yes, and I think that does lead to weird flip situations. Like we've heard Ball Control talk about how in a previous series where he was playing a very low-value warrior deck, no Omega Assemblies, everything else, and then I think he was playing against Shaman, and he was just like, oh yeah, I'm the aggro deck there. Like, he always fatigues me if he wants to in that situation. But the difference to that is now the Archivist Elysiana that is coming into play for these warrior decks that are being brought by Bunnyhoppor, KC, etc., so on this week. So it is a valid strategy, and it has really been looking towards keeping that warrior in play through the protection where it's relevant, and then potentially just isolating that warrior on the other side and saying, well, that deck can't get a win, so that's out of the equation. What else have you got?
Yeah, I feel like the warrior protection is meant to try and manipulate the way that your opponent cues their decks.
Yeah.
It's got some very strange, powerful matchups that are in the mix, and I think that's really the key talking point for it. It's a true metagame deck where it's trying to manipulate how your opponent thinks about the game, not necessarily how your opponent is playing that game once you're inside of it. Warrior versus Priest, hotly contested amongst the two of us.
What do you, like, put a number on it? What do you think the win rate is?
Warrior favored in the neighborhood of like 53 to 55%.
Okay. I would say it's somewhere in the region of 50 to 52 at most. So we're not far away. It just sounds like a lot.
I will say that when the warrior wins, I feel like it squeaks by. When the priest wins, it just crushes the warrior.
Sure.
And so I think watching those games take place and experiencing those games, you get a worse sense of what it is because of that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the case. I feel for me, it's been one of the hardest things to do is separate my head from how warrior wins a game. Like when my warrior games are very close, I'm like, man, that matchup doesn't feel very good. And then I look down at my deck tracker in 2 weeks and I go, oh, I'm beating him like 60% of the time. You're barely winning, but you're winning. And when I'm losing the games, it's so decisive, it's so quick, and I can't help but remember it because I just died in such a spectacular fashion. And so that, to me, has been pretty much the major issue for evaluating a matchup if I'm not purely going on stats and instead trying to incorporate theory with it. You have to literally mark down the games, and you got to stop thinking about how the matchup actually feels.
Yep. From my side of that, Like I mentioned yesterday, I've been playing a lot of Priest for the last couple of days, and my stats report 59% against Warrior, I believe. It was high 50s, either 58 or 59, which, again, we're both pretty good players. We're going to beat a lot of people with matchups that don't necessarily represent what our stats are reporting.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I think someone could roll their face across a keyboard and win with Priest. With Warrior, you got to have some actual intelligence. Duh, Soddle.
Reminder that your argument is that you were favored in the matchup, which kind of invalidates your whole point. But carry on making stupid
Best of
arguments.
47 me right now.
All right. Well, talk amongst yourselves, chat.
I have a question about this weapons project. What we're swinging at, when we're swinging at it, and why.
Things that it kills so we can kill them, and often.
Okay.
Is that good enough for you?
Yeah.
All right. If you want the long form explanation, you were asking me, does he attack the Light Warden? Is that what you were asking me?
No, I was just asking you exactly what I asked you.
All right, fair enough. Well, then I answered exactly what I answered.
Correct.
Yeah.
No wordplay involved.
In the case that the question was deeper, like, do you ever need to soften this thing up so it can't get back to full health on the following turn? No, you don't.
Hang on. This topsy-turvy. Okay, that turn was passed quickly. I have questions about the topsy-turvy, though. If you use the topsy-turvy on the Light Warden there, in the face of Restless Mummy, you preserve a Northshire
Cleric lives, yeah. Okay. Definitely worth thinking about.
I mean, I know exactly what Bunny's going to do this turn. He's going to kill both of these.
Yes, he is. Snip, snap, go.
Yeah. Shield block. I'm like, what the... I guess you do have Brawl in hand?
True. It's also thinking about what Psychopomp means on the following turn.
Yeah. I feel like playing for a Brawl is a really good way to die.
I think you have certain hands that like let you play towards Brawl, but I don't think this hand particularly is one. I think this was a kill stuff kind of hand. Weapons Project, Restless Mummy, that's just what you want. Like I said, it's just kind of what you mulligan for in the matchup.
It's the one, yeah, literally those two cards.
Yep.
You keep Town Crier, of course, because of it fetching Restless Mummy.
I do think you also keep Brawl.
Yeah, I'll keep Brawl.
Ah, the old 000 hand.
I feel like I would have topsy-turvied that Light Warden.
It's a good catch. It was a good catch. I was not paying close attention to Fino's turn. Yeah, I think you're right that Fino passed the turn a little bit quickly. I think it was definitely worth talking about. It's kind of weird looking, right? Oh, I'm scared of Restless Mummy, so I'm going to give my minion exactly 6 health. But, like, in the context of the other minion on the board, it makes sense.
Yeah. Unless it was a beaming sidekick, I cared about it.
Yeah.
I guess if it was 2 health, I would have cared about it. Yeah, sure. That would have taken it out of the way.
What now?
I wonder what Bunny was weighing up here, if he's just like taking his time for the sake of considering all the rest of the turns.
Yeah.
I do think that there is some merit to try and rip a Shield Slam in that spot. It's a spot I found myself in a lot, where I stare down an injured Blade Master and I go, I don't really know how I'm decisively beating this. And there's multiple effects to the shield block, where you get 1 card closer to Dynamatic, you get 1 card closer to Plague of Wrath.
Ziliax.
All of those things help you fight against it. But the Snip Snap's doing the same thing once you have Warpath, right?
Yep, I think Snip Snap plus Warpath in play is definitely influencing this to some extent. I think Snip Snap plus what that means for the extra breakpoints on this last charge of the weapon. I think that's important as well. I love that you asked the question. It's like, I wonder what Bunnyhoppor was spending his whole turn considering. Was like, what he does at the start of the turn, he considers, am I Bunnyhoppor? And then if the answer to that question is yes, then he takes the whole turn. It's just what he does.
Not too quickly.
I guess it's like, is it posterity's sake, or are you actually going through different lines? Like,
I think he's actually just constantly thinking about things. It's not always going to be about the particular turn he's facing down, but he's just considering curves. He's, you know, imagining board states 2 or 3 turns ahead and just seeing what they look like from both sides in different worlds. There's all kinds of things. Like, the simpler a turn is, in a weird way, the more opportunity you have to, like, really develop complex lines. Because you're like, well, this is what I'm going to do this turn.
like to influence it.
Yeah, like, this is what I'm going to do this turn. Forget about that. I've worked that out in 10 seconds. Let me use 65 seconds to just imagine all the weird stuff that can happen in the next few turns.
Sometimes I think about stupid plays, and then I try to get something out of them. Except I think to myself, can I do something similar to that, except not bad?
What a quote that is. We've been using like a much shorter version of that answer in most of our clips that we've played. Like the addition of, yeah, so I try and do something like that, but not bad. Like just makes that answer so much funnier.
It's beautiful.
I think it's a very, very true response from Fino as well. I've told the story before, but I think the first time I really watched him play was during Trinity Series, where he was kind of the unknown member of his team, and he was on call with his teammates, suggesting weird plays in a lot of spots. And Twitch chat were just like, who is this guy, and why is he so terrible? Like, why is he suggesting all these bad plays? To which I tweeted soon after, the fact that Fino considers all those plays and you don't is why he's one of the best players in the world, and you're ranked 10.
Pair of shields makes it much tougher for Bunnyhoppor. And that Psycho Pump. When do you play it? Tolvir, Cleric, Light Warden, and Sidekick are in the pool.
Sidekick.
Consider.
The end begins.
The last minute.
I just saw the 1-2, and I wasn't listening to the voice line. It's one of the ones you like to see.
It is. It's a big outcome. Now Fino will just be thinking, well, Light Warden in play, Topsy-Turvy in hand, big health minion on the board.
Push the 9.
It starts to add up.
How does Dynomatic interact if you flip this?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Not well enough, apparently. Would Dynomatic have been played on the previous turn? Yes. Is Dynomatic good enough? Because if that Light Warden lives...
Or if the Blade Master lives.
I'm looking at the nightmare scenario of Bunnyhoppor where it goes 1-3-1 across the board.
Right.
I wonder.
You straight up die in that scenario.
Yes. To a card, right?
That's what I said, isn't it?
I wonder.
Like that you can straight up die in that scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, I heard you straight up die in that scenario, as if he was just like dead on board if that happened.
The look on your face was making me think how I thought about that and said it. And I was like, did I say the word can?
I have no idea.
Me either.
Check the tapes.
Whoa.
Take the 9 double warpath. Just the Light Warden left alive in Reborn mode.
Okay, so that actually seems pretty smart to me. The way you win the matchup is exhausting resources.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case, Fino needs a big draw here. What are his big draws? Bonsomdi. You know, that's the card I'm kind of fearing if I'm in Bunnyhoppor's spot, but I think it is sort of a math problem. You take a bunch of damage here, but the idea is that you recover through this. And honestly, in this spot, Bunnyhoppor's right. That was not a huge card that was in Fino's hand. It wasn't value-oriented, and now the Dynomatic gets a payoff. And he slowly starts armoring up, putting taunts in the way. And now with our Megadillo and with Tomb Warden, Fino is in a massive deficit where he needs a Colossal draw.
Right.
What now?
I think regardless of result here, it's going to be a tale of two topsy-turvies for Fino. The one he didn't use and the one he did use. Flipping the 4-9 into the 9-4 did open up some extra removal options for Bunny, but it pushed so much extra damage when he had that Light Warden on board threatening lethal, and then the protection of the Cleric early on, or rather the failure to protect the Cleric early on. Was that worth the usage of the topsy-turvy?
Well, there's something to consider now, which is Fino does have 40 health, Bunnyhoppor's low, and so the one thing Fino has really is time. And so with Northshire Cleric drawn, I'm seeing a chain of draws where you can pop off and have some things happen.
Yes, but time is something of an illusion with this priest deck. It doesn't really matter like how long it takes you to die. If the warrior here has a couple of turns to just play some minions, you're dead. Like, they just have enough power to kill any board you can develop in one turn. And yes, those minions do play into your outs, like Circle of Healing, Pyromancer, Northshire Cleric draw a million, but there is a tipping point where the board's just too big, and it doesn't matter if you draw Armet, whatever else you draw, like, they just have stats in play to deal with it.
That's too modern.
That's too modern, yeah. TLDR version, too modern.
Yep, and Fino saw Armageddon and he goes, okay, well, yeah, that's the tipping point. Take the draw. I don't know what gets him there. That's an exploding hand I see up top.
You have bet.
And that's a game 1 win. It's over to Bunnyhoppor.
Gotta look at him. The topsy that he did and the topsy that he didn't. All those question marks. Now, if I remember rightly, there was not a Town Crier played, correct? That was just a naturally drawn Restless Mummy in the opening hand, which is an influencer for sure. But then I'd also have to find out whether that was a card that was kept in the mulligan, because that's also a huge influencing point. You know that your opponent is going to keep Restless Mummy in the mulligan. So if there's a card there that's been kept that then hasn't been played, you want to factor that in as well. All of those things matter in terms of that decision. I totally missed it. I was talking about something else. You pointed it out. It didn't necessarily look like Fino considered it. He might have done. We might hear from him on it later. But I think it was definitely worth talking about. I love that you brought it up. I think it was a great catch.
I think the thing that I look at is the difference in the Warrior having its tools and not having its tools as well. You know, we've seen a lot of the Warrior matchups where they're struggling in the early game to really get the job done. And so the importance of having Weapons Project and having Restless Mummy, and at the same time also using your health as a resource. It's quite rare that I've seen players willing to expend as much life as Bunnyhoppor did in that matchup just to clear minions. But he tanked 15 by simply attacking with a 2-attack weapon. That's a lot of damage to take, but Priest doesn't have reach.
Nope. Just get them off board and the game ends. We saw it not only attacking the Light Warden early on, you know, he smacked the Beaming Sidekick, then he started beating down on the Light Warden with the Weapons Project and the Restless Mummy. But then in the late game as well, like, we were having some fun with, like, what does a Dynamatic do? But the responsible clear for sure was the one that Bunnyhoppor did, which involved smashing your face into a 9-4. And normally against a lot of decks, that would be a scary situation because they might draw their Fireball, they might draw their Kill Command. No such thing with Priest. Get them off board, you win.
So for Fino, I feel for that early draw, the 2 silence and the topsy. You know, 2 silences.
The draw was ugly.
It was really bad. And so for the players that have been running 2 silences, you know, we've been seeing them have Priest starts and then draw silences later. For Fino, he draws silences early on, and he's stuck in a bad spot. So, you know, it's hard to really criticize too much from that position. He did what he could, and then that topsy, that's really the point that you have to look at. So I feel for him in this one, and he needs these next 2 games pretty desperately. But we got to go to a break. When we come back, our featured match is hopping into game number 2 between Bunnyhoppor and Fino. Right now, Fino got to win these next 2. Stay tuned.
The shadows are rising again, darker than they've ever been. As evil descends from the skies, the world cries out, how will we survive? Out of the hall of explorers, and up from the dusty tomb, they grab their whips and fedoras. These legends of the past know exactly what to do. There might be magic monsters, mummies in the markets, and ancient mysticism. They're surely scorching deserts,
is Sam Braithwaite, and I'm the Senior Global Franchise Lead for Hearthstone Esports. This event was especially cool because it takes place right after the brand new expansion, Rise of Shadows. Historically in Hearthstone Esports, we do our big events like this towards the end of an expansion cycle, but we really wanted to shake things up and really showcase that not only is the world champion the person who can pilot the best decks, but also the person who, when presented with a brand new game, can put together the best decks leading into the World Championship. Cheers to you guys, the sold-out crowd here for the HCT 2019 World Championship.
Welcome back to 2019 HCT World Championship.
We've had a lot of fun games, and we're looking forward to the grand finals. Showdown. Viper versus Hunter Ace. Only one can be the champion. Oh, come on!
Match be dead.
Wacko pick a Vis coming out from Hunter Ace.
It's now or never. Archvillain reform.
Okay! In a completely solved game, Hunter Ace finds a way to maximize his chances. It's been a wonderful journey throughout the past few years of the Hearthstone Championship Tour, where stars were made and dreams came true.
It's Splendid Sunday here for Hearthstone Grandmasters in Europe. We have that 6th bonus match that's coming up after this one. Right now, we're amidst the series between Bunnyhoppor and Feno in this one. I'm Nathan, that's Admirable Zamora, joined by Simon Sottle Welch. And Sottle, I gotta say, that game one from Bunnyhoppor looked very peculiar. But at the end of the day, the more I think about it, I'm like, what do I need this extra life for? I just got to kill the minions.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything particularly peculiar about it. It was just smart play. He was recognizing that he's a warrior. He has health to spare. That's kind of what his deck does. He can always build up armor. He was getting it from the weapons projects anyway, which is giving him that buffer to attack with. It's kind of the purpose of the card. It's why even though it's a symmetrical effect, the warrior will just often quite happily play it, even if there's not a Harrison Jones following it up. Warrior has so much more gas to make usage out of that extra removal than its opponent does.
Yeah, really, really cool, interesting thing to watch. You know, seeing this deck in action, and we saw Casey pilot it, and things just didn't really work out for him. I feel like his panouts for this really didn't come together.
I mean, he got mechathuned. That's what happened.
Yeah, yeah.
We know, we have questions. We think he could have beaten it, but moving on.
I mean, he still put himself 75%. I mean,
yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want the point I was getting at is that it was played in a warrior mirror, where a lot of those are just going to play the same way. They're going to look the same. You're going to pan out super unlucky, right?
Yep.
But against a deck that's trying to pressure you back with minions, that was really where my question mark was is Hecklebot good enough to get that job done alongside this deck? Or how pressured are you to have your early tools in it? And that, to me, was a bit answered by the Bunnyhoppor series, where like, if you have the tools, you look gold. But if you don't have them, how does it work?
I think Hecklebot is just a surprisingly good card against Priest, to be perfectly honest. 3/8 Taunt needs one of their silences to push through in reasonable circumstances, and then the minions that you can pull, deck's full of Battlecry minions, and minions that they want to play on their timing where they can stay in play and be protected. If you pull out the High Priest Armet and you have a Shield Slam or something in hand to deal with, And same thing with Bomb Samdi, right? Like, you take away their 2 big win conditions against Warrior by bringing it out onto the board on your terms and not theirs, let alone Nefeset Ritualist, Norsha Clerics, just all these things that you can take out on your terms so they don't get value out of them.
Other side of it, injured Tolvir, injured Blade Master.
Yeah, whatever.
All right, fair enough.
You still played a bigger taunt than the minion you pulled out from them, though, right?
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
And take a look at the rest of namaste. Taking a look at the rest of Bunnyhoppor's lineup with the Quest Shaman and with Quest Druid in here. I was surprised to see players go back towards Quest Druid this week away from Malygos Druid, because over in the Americas region, it felt like it was pushed the opposite way, where they're like, whoa, yeah, this is the thing. And more players seem to move on to Malygos Druid. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but I think the Geppetto Joybuzz being introduced and shown that it's working in that build was a pretty big impact. And this week we see players going back over to Quest Druid in these lineups, and I'm like, really? Like, I feel like taking the Nomi out makes the Warrior matchup worse, and the whole point of the Quest deck in Druid side is to fight off against Warriors very effectively.
It does improve matchups against a lot of other decks, though, and I think we've seen a few players, say that they, I think we've heard this almost exact explanation where someone started to say, like, I feel okay with the deck against Priest, and then very quickly clarified, I still know it's a bad matchup, by the way. We saw that with Tice today, exactly, and then I think we've heard that from another player as well. I think this Quest Druid, they are starting to feel a lot more comfortable in other matchups that aren't Warrior. And I still think, like, as long as you have Elise in there, like, as long as you can make an infinite threat at the end of the game, whether that be Feoris, whether it be Nomi, like, whatever it is, like, there's still enough gas that you should beat Warrior on average. And for me, I know we've had this inane argument, like, we have enough inane arguments on broadcast. Like, you should hear how inane our arguments are off air. They're so much worse about Malygos Druid.
Or better, depending on your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we love them. About Malygos Druid versus Quest Druid. And I'm of the opinion that Malygos Druid is a little bit more inconsistent because of the Moonfires and whatever else come into the deck. But then we start going down that rabbit hole of, okay, well, what exactly are the equivalent of those cards in the Quest Druid? And you argue that they're about the same level of consistency and they have just different spikes in different matchups. Personally, I think generic, like, win rate, take all the matchups into equation. I think Quest Druid probably has a higher average, but I think Malygos Druid is the better, like, spike deck. If you get a good read on what your opponent's playing, you can use Mali Druid to specifically target that stuff much more effectively.
It's kind of the age-old thing of timing being just as important as the power level of the deck.
Yes, right, exactly.
Yeah. We're not just babbling for time, by the way. We are awaiting some technical issues that the players are experiencing, so thank you for your patience on this matter. For Fino, the Protect Priest, he's seeing Warrior protecting it on the other side, and now he's got in game number 1. And, his exact phrasing yesterday was the Protect for Mage was stupid on Orange's side. And so I get that he's messing around with that. They're teammates, they're good friends, they're good practice partners, but in practice, it has felt like Protect Priest has still yielded one of the best outcomes that you have in the lineup.
Yeah, and I think also, direct quote, he said, you should protect Priest. It wins every matchup. And I think, when you say that, you are specifically almost calling out the Warrior matchup as the one that you believe is favored when other people don't. And it was the Warrior matchup he unfortunately fell to.
Yeah, indeed it was. So it's going to lead us to another break. So when we come back, we're going to try to get game number 2 of this underway, and we'll have an update for you as far as where the match stands. Thank you for your patience, and stay tuned.
Hearthstone Esports is home to many competitive formats, each with their own unique variants and rules. Today, we're going to break down one of them, the Shield Phase Conquest format. And here's how it works. To start, both players bring 4 decks, each from a unique class. The match starts with a Shield Phase. This is where both players choose one of their own decks to protect, making it ineligible to be banned. Once the Protect phase has ended, both players will then ban one of their opponent's decks, removing it from the pool. Each player then selects which of their remaining decks they would like to play first, before beginning the first game of the series. When the first game of the series is over, the winner's deck is removed from their pool of eligible decks. Both players then select the next deck they would like to play. The loser of the first game can choose to replay with the deck they lost with, or they can choose one of their other 2 available decks. In Best of 3 conquests, the first player to 2 wins is the victor. In Best of 5 series, such as those in the semifinals or finals of major events, the first player that makes it to 3 wins takes the W. It's that easy. Shield Phase Conquest allows players to showcase their skill set across different classes, while still giving them the opportunity to play the deck they're most confident with. Now that you've got the download on Shield Phase Conquest, we wish you well on your deck building adventures.
Darker than they've ever been. As evil descends from the skies, the world cries out, how will we survive? Out of the hall of explorers, and up from the dusty tombs, they grab their whips and fedoras. These legends of the past know exactly what to do. There might be magic monsters, mummies in the markets, and ancient mysticism. But this league's gonna save the world.
Splendid Sunday for Hearthstone Grandmasters in Europe, although we are experiencing a less than splendid hiccup right now. Players are experiencing a connectivity issue, which they are working on resolving immediately right now. There is a solution in place, but it will take a few moments. So, again, thank you for your patience. We are getting into game number 2 of Bunnyhoppor versus Feno as quickly as we can. And so, into this match right now, Bunnyhoppor has a 1-0 lead, taking a win with Warrior over Priest. And we have the rest of the matchup to look at. And I think before we get to that, though, I think it's important to talk about standings and what this match means for those just joining us.
Yes, this is a clash on both ends of the table. Bunnyhoppor, for the first time in a long time, is staring up at someone else on top of the league table above him, as Jarla's recent streak of victories has put him 1 game ahead. Bunnyhoppor now has the chance to match that. And on the complete inverse scenario, for the first time, Feno's looking down on someone else in the relegation fight, looking to put some daylight between himself and Psycho, and be in a position that looked incredibly unlikely just a couple of weeks ago. And now he'll be in a spot, if he wins this, where he's won 3 out of his last 4 games, which isn't relegation form, that's playoffs form. And if he can potentially keep that going, maybe he can even get back into that scrap in the middle of the table for that playoff spot.
Yeah, I mean, you look at like PNC from Americas in Season 1. He ended with a 7-7 record during the regular season, went on to win the whole thing.
Yep. Sometimes that's just good enough.
Yeah.
You set it up multiple times. You said all Feno has to do is do what he did in the front half of Season 1 in the back half of Season 2.
Minus 2 games.
Yeah, and he's well on his way to be able to do that, although he's facing problems here, and he's facing big problems because the Priest has lost a game. And you generally want to bank on, if you're protecting your Priest, the players have this meme about, oh, you know, we're playing best of 1 because the Priests win on both sides. They just get protected and then they win the games. If that doesn't happen, you're throwing that game away to Warrior, then suddenly you're facing an uphill battle.
At the end of the day, it's a percentage play.
Yeah.
I agree with the percentage play. I think you should be very much focusing on Priest in that instance. I think that would be, if there's a change in that percentage from one side, it would be the think tank from Casey and Bunnyhoppor in this situation, where they have crafted a lineup specifically to try and manipulate how your opponent queues up, and as a result, take what they see as a favorable for it, which frankly I agree with.
Yeah, we didn't see it genuinely come to fruition from Casey's side in the previous series, and there's actually another series involving that coming up soon. Very similar situation with Ball Control.
Oh, yeah.
His lineup going up against Casey in our final game, so we'll see if he has more success. Boar actually has some thoughts on the lineup that I'll share with you when we get to that one as well.
Oh, I know them.
Because he doesn't quite see it the same way as you're describing it.
That's right. We have a 6th match that's coming up after this one. We're in our 5th match right now. Again, still awaiting the players to connect. The solution is being executed as we speak, but we can take a look at the America schedule because we do have more Hearthstone after Europe as well. We can see what we're in store for. The one thing I'm really looking forward to is TJ's Frodan's match of the day with Just Saying and Amnesiac.
Sorry, I just see TJ's Frodans. It doesn't say anything about match of the day.
Oh, true story. TJ's Frodans.
Just
come on down to TJ's Frodans. We'll get you hooked up with a mighty good deal.
They're just labeling the decks. There's TJ's decks on the left-hand side. There's Frodan's decks on the right-hand side.
And cosplaying them will be Just Saying and Amnesiac.
Absolutely.
A couple of things I'm also looking forward to in this one with Naguidan. He took his 2nd match loss yesterday, and was trying to still hold on to that #1 spot that was there. I think Firebat played beautifully in his series yesterday, where now he's facing off against Eddie. The contrast of the Holy Wrath Paladin styles that are in there, where Eddie's gone with this like turbo draw variant that features Loot Hoarder and Solid's Pride in the list as well. Like, that is a drastic departure from what that deck has looked like all season long in Europe and in Americas, and frankly for quite some time. Players toyed with Solid's Pride but couldn't find a working list that they liked.
It definitely feels like, in terms of Americas at least, that Firebat was kind of the genesis of the Holy Wrath Paladin. He was on it quite early, and a lot of players kind of followed suit based on his success with it. Also looking forward to Frozen versus Monsanto. I think both of those players have played incredibly well this season. I think people who've followed competitive Hearthstone the last couple of years would expect that from Frozen. Maybe 1 or 2 people less familiar with Monsanto coming into Grandmasters, but those who pay close attention, those whose jobs it is to keep up, know exactly how good Monsanto is, and I think he's been living up to the hype this season as well.
The combo masterminds battling it out. Frozen's got that Spellword Jeweler Azalina package as well.
Which apparently he was very proud of describing how it was.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
Block the OTK, take the OTK, use the OTK. Like that has to be the most satisfying feeling you could possibly get playing Hearthstone.
It's the ultimate stop hitting yourself schoolyard bully trick. That's what it is. Just each Moonfire.
But you're just hitting me. Stop.
Yeah, it's your stuff.
That's a true story. It's a true story.
It's exactly the same thing as just grabbing someone's hand and smacking them in the face with it. Literally grabbing their hand.
You know that scene in Dark Knight Rises where Bane grabs Batman's fist in that fight and he hits him with his own thing? I always picture him saying, "Stop hitting yourself," as he does that. And I'm like, that feels very out of character for Bane. However, I do enjoy the feeling of this, where he's just toying with Batman the whole scene. Like, imagine being that powerful. You could just mess with Batman.
Yeah. Just pick him up, break his back over your knee. I don't have to imagine. I am that powerful.
Batman just swoops down and tackles you. You're like, oh, gosh. I didn't mean a real fight.
Twitch chat's like, wow, we knew they were filling for time, but we didn't expect Batman to be showing up.
Well, I didn't either. This is kind of how the freeform thing works.
Yeah.
Goodness, I think I'm genuinely out of topics for the first time in my life.
We said, we touched on Ball Control and Casey for later on, which I think is worth setting up because there is a very, very interesting matchup to look at because Casey is running the similar lineup to what Bunnyhoppor has. If it's not 120 for 120, I think it probably is. And we certainly looked at it. You had it explained to you, and then we looked at it ourselves, and we're like, actually, this lineup makes sense in terms of how things are broken down. But Ball Control disagrees, and he thinks that the way that things resolve, if based on picks and bans, you're in a position where it's actually still very even though Casey and Bunnyhoppor feel like they built this very, very favored lineup against what they were expecting to face.
Yeah, I heard the explanation, and I'm not quite sold on the idea still. I think it's the difference in like how big is a big edge, right?
Right.
Like a 55% edge is a massive delta in win rate. That's 10 points. Like you struggle and fight the entire expansion to try to find those 10 points somewhere. I think they found it. Like,
full stop.
Does it not work out that way? Like,
well, I mean, that's because you have to protect warrior, right? You then get your priest banned in a lot of situations, which means that, you're arguing that this, or the players who have built this lineup are arguing that their warrior puts them in such a favorable position that it kind of overrides the advantage that Priest has against Druid and Shaman in certain lineups, for example. Because that's all you're doing, right? Is you're ending up with this new deck that you think is favored against two of your opponent's decks at minimum, but you lose your Priest for that cost, which at the very least is usually favored against two of people's decks in their lineup. So it's almost like a tit-for-tat thing kind of going down, and then when the picks and bans get to come into the situation, Boar's arguing that you get put in situations where you kind of just, it comes down to a 50-50 matchup a lot of the time, or both players can queue favorables.
Yeah, I get that. I think the one thing that it's accounting for that is not being necessarily discussed in that is when players bring a different lineup. Right? You can count on the Priest being there, like, almost certainly.
Sure.
And so if that's going to be one of the primary ways you attempt to offset a matchup, how can you change things when players have perhaps come prepared for Priest in that instance?
I think that's an interesting way of looking at it, sure. But I think that lineup from Bunny and Casey, I think they were specifically targeting what these opponents were doing.
Oh,
which
yeah.
I think these opponents are doing a standard thing, right? I think what we have in Europe as a standard lineup is Priest, Warrior, either Shaman or Druid, or, well, and then 2 out of the 3 of Shaman, Druid, and Holy Wrath Paladin.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're having as the standard lineup. They got that absolutely right. They think they have this massively favored position. Just so happens that the opponents disagree. And I think that's an interesting spot to be in, right? When, like, both sides of the equation are saying, no, we're fine here.
Yeah, I took a look at the deck list in that discussion as well, and it does look to me like Casey and Boar is an actual mirror of what we're seeing with Fino and Bunnyhoppor, and that makes perfect sense.
Oh, Fino and Boar are 120 for 120 as well?
It looked that way. I mean, that would make sense as being teammates and practicing together. And for Casey and Bunnyhoppor, very much the same way. Not the teammates part, but the practice group very much has been a core of that, and that's been, for, I mean, I can't even remember since when now. It seems like the two of them have always gone in tandem. And so when I look at this on paper now, execution, I think, only partially comes into the way for this, because I feel like for Fino and Boar, they play very differently. For Casey and Bunnyhoppor, I feel like their playstyles are, very similar in that regard.
Yes. Yeah, at least in terms of the actual plays they make. In terms of how they do it, complete polar opposites.
In terms of timing.
Yeah, Casey in a second, Bunny in 75 seconds. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's going to be super interesting to see that come down, because we didn't really get to see the game 3, which is the interesting one. Like, I think that's the point of contention for camp Bunnyhoppor and Casey versus camp Ball Control and Fino, is what happens in that game 3. Like, once the Warrior picked up its win that it was guaranteed to get over the other Warrior, then what does that game 3 come down to? We didn't really get to see that resolution because the bad thing happened.
Mechathune.
Yeah, the Mechathune came into play and it ruined the situation for Casey. So that kind of threw everything on its head. But, like, it comes down to, again, opinions on what exactly the Druid versus Holy Wrath Paladin matchup is like, because opinions on that kind of change everything as well.
Fight.
Who am I fighting? Who do you want me to fight?
Oh, I just, cheering for a fight on the opinions. I love it.
Oh, okay.
That's the whole point of the competition, is to see whose opinions panned out.
Yeah.
Not necessarily see who's right, but just who's panned out.
Hearthstone's kind of like that. It's a game of opinions in a lot of spots, and players will think they're right, and every player will say that they've done the most research and theirs is the most supported by evidence and this and that. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of opinion-based thinking in terms of which decks are good, which lineups are good, which tech cards are good, so on and so forth. Sometimes you're just guessing, sometimes you're making reads. Sometimes we get into this spot and just both sides of the matchup think that they're in a perfectly fine spot based on the lineups that they've ended up with.
And they very well may be as well. For those of you just joining us, we are not babbling for the sake of it. We are awaiting a connectivity issue that is being resolved. Currently, the players are having trouble with the EU accounts, and so they're resolving an issue and getting them somewhere else to play at the moment. And so that's what we're waiting for right now with Bunnyhoppor versus Fino, and Bunnyhoppor up a game, having won game 1 with Warrior, taking on Fino's Priest. And so with that, we can take a look at the standings again to update people as well, to see exactly where players are sitting. And this match, again, has been the tale of Bunnyhoppor chasing down that first place alongside Yarla, and for Fino finally getting that breathing room away from Psycho in this instance. For Fino's sake, Psycho losing that match was a major deal coming into this final match for this week.
It was, and you saw Psycho's reaction to the situation as he very emotionally reacted to the loss. He kind of slumped down, head in hands, just as we lost his webcam feed on the broadcast. He was clearly very upset about it. Fino, honestly, since that week where he roped out the Priest turn with kind of the mislethal situation, which cost him the game against Casey. Since that week where he was obviously frustrated, because who wouldn't be by that? He just got up, he left, he just didn't want to be on camera. Eventually came back to close out the game in terms of professionalism. Since that moment, he's really seemed pretty chill about the whole situation. And when we've spoken to him, he's kind of echoed that idea where he said that, mentally he feels very healthy about the whole thing. And he thinks that that's partially contributing him to getting back in a good spot.
At a certain point, you got to come to terms with reality. And I think once you've done that, it's easier to think clearly. Druid for Bunnyhoppor. And this is an example, I think, of what Boar was talking about. It's like, well, this matchup happens.
Yeah.
Don't you just flip that warrior thing right back on its head? It's like, yeah.
Time waits for no one.
Right. Generally, people will argue back and forth, well, I get this good matchup, or they get this good matchup, and then a lot of it just really does come down to what you think in the Holy Wrath Paladin versus Druid matchup, because that is the one that potentially the series can come down to in game number 3.
I can tell you what I think about it. Guessing with how Bunnyhoppor and Casey built their decks, I can tell you what they think about it.
Yep. I think they very much do agree that Druids are in a good spot. Not in this matchup, though.
Unless you're Tice, apparently. Whew! That game
He was
lit.
never in a good spot. Right up until he was not in a good spot.
No, I definitely saw that right on the coin crystal merchant. It was very obvious.
He looked so dead for 11 turns.
I still think he did die somewhere in there, and something happened, and he wasn't.
Someone just rolled a dice, and we just entered a parallel timeline.
Yo! No quest progress.
Life is an afterthought.
I think if you're in Bunnyhoppor's spot, seeing that 2-3 whip onto the board is a sight to behold. You would have preferred nothing, but as the alternative, I think this is second best.
Yes.
I guess beaming sidekick go.
Sure.
Just don't think that would have happened.
Downside is these Light Wardens are coming back with a vengeance starting next turn.
Behold, jewels of the sun.
Nino gives the nod. Crystal Merchant hits the board, and Nourish is drawn indeed with the Anubisat Defender already in hand.
That's an interesting draw. Wow, I'm not sure what to do in Fino's spot.
Thinking about a Pyro Topsy turn?
That's exactly what I was thinking. Coin, Pyro, Topsy, heal.
Coin, Pyro, Topsy, heal. Yeah, sure. You don't want to leave a hero power target?
That's right.
Yeah.
Do you like to play with fire?
Perhaps you just want the 3-2 to come back from the Psychopomp, though. Just be a nuisance.
Wouldn't you rather have it live and get a guaranteed Light Warden?
Me personally, yes. What does the coin mean? Would be my first question. And then furthermore, maybe you don't. I mean, you have another Psychopomp in hand.
Mm-hmm.
You bring back a pair of 3-2s. That's a lot of damage that stacks up. Is there a piece of removal you're trying to bait? I will say, for how Priest is so powerful, it has some really tough turns.
Yep. What was the analogy I was using for a while? It's unstable, like a melting down nuclear reactor or something. One misstep and it just blows up in your face.
Yeah. And that's when I said that you thought the future of energy was nuclear or thorium power, but it is in fact divine spirit.
Yep.
Thank you, friend.
Coin also accounts for a 1-drop being drawn. It's interesting. The spot feels pretty bad for Bunnyhoppor.
I mean, is it any better if there was a Wild Pyro already on board that couldn't be killed last turn? This Beaming Psychic wasn't here, and that was a Light Warden instead?
Yeah, I think Swipe was better in that instance.
Okay.
Because you swipe off the Light Warden, it kills off the Psycho Pump. You're looking at 3-1 and 2-1.
I wonder.
In this instance, you're looking at 6 across the board, no matter how you slice it.
Okay.
I don't know if Fino planned for that, but the coin 1-drop really mattered.
Coin 1-drop, definitely very relevant, especially with the amount of 1-drops that you play in the deck and the amount of 1-drops that you had available to draw.
That's when things get complicated.
Yeah. Now this Pyro looks somewhat unfortunate. Now the development is just starting to look a little slow on Fino's side.
Yeah, Fino, I think, is really fearing what just a Starfall for 2 looks like.
I mean, he should be fearing what a Nourish into 2 Anubisat defenders looks like.
Is that happening next turn?
This is true.
Mind you, Bunnyhoppor took turn 2 off of Quest to clear out a Light Warden.
Yeah, I did forget about that momentarily, which does give Fino a little bit of breathing room.
Quickly.
The end begins.
You like to play with fire?
Looks kind of weird, but, I mean, they're not dying. Maybe you do just Nourish. I mean, Ty said it doesn't really matter if you're completing it on turn 7, turn 8. What? Fight for board.
Such a loss, though. You're going to draw 3 cards and just not have the mana to spend them?
Well, 2 of them are free.
You're going to ramp?
No. I'm going to draw.
Right.
You need a lot more cards. And I think if you're going to take a turn off a quest and also not get the mana ramp, that 2 Nubasath defenders is literally the reason to do it. Like this is like the dream scenario to deviate.
Yeah. I can't convince myself.
Time waits for no one.
You going to play Lodi?
Your wish is my suggestion.
Into the double Pyromancer board. Oh, that's upsetting. Like, I don't... Here's my argument, right? Like, I don't necessarily think Nourish needs to be played because I don't think there's any real reason to panic this turn. Like, there's 2 freaking Pyromancers on the board. There's no way that this health total is getting to a point big enough to kill you. Fino's disincentivized from playing, like, extra arms or anything like that to be able to push extra damage. So I just don't think you're getting hit that hard this turn.
Fair point.
I think you can kind of chill.
I must consider...
That hard, of course, being very relative. There's 9 in play and you're at 16.
Ah.
But we just don't look at that.
Yeah, don't worry about that. Pfft, no.
I must consider...
Never any sacrifices you're making here on Fino's side. Perhaps you attack and then cast a Power Word Shield.
Quickly.
It puts your Wild Pyros into their 3-1 state afterwards.
Yep.
But it pushes the full 9. It clears off the Zephyrus. It draws you a card. I don't really know. I can't remember a situation where I've had 2 Reborn Wild Pyromancers in play.
Right. Those Pyromancers are very much irritating me. I will say that much. Everything Fino wants to do is just not really a possibility because of those Pyros, but they are pushing damage.
Yeah, but that's about to get squashed.
Oh, yeah? No Loti this turn?
I want to Power the Wild.
You want to Power of the Wild.
2 Anubis, buff them up.
The way they're going to get dealt with is that they're going to get silenced. So is the buff important?
A silence clears off one of Fino's 3/2s.
It does, yes. I continue to be irritated by these Wild Pyromancers. Interesting.
And so that means Fino's going to be... Oh, you can't even trade him for... I don't know. I'm very worried for Fino in this spot. Bunnyhoppor got through the early game pretty cleanly, and he had a massive follow-up. Like, this was the nuts in terms of follow-up.
Yep. To be fair, I think Oasis Surges would have been extremely competitive here as well. But Nourish into a Nubisaf Defender was for sure the absolute boy here. Like, how does this work? You just... Silence blows up your own Pyromancers, so you trade them in, but then Silence blows up your other Pyromancers. You drew the Cleric, but you don't have a circle. You're getting healing value this turn, and then looking for a circle, so you can get maximum healing value, but then you're casting Circle of Healing with 2/3/2 Pyromancers in play.
Sounds like Pyro 1 is dead, which is actually like Pyro 7.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Injured?
That is not the draw you're looking for. I think Bunnyhopper's got free reign now.
He clears this turn. In a variety of ways.
I wonder.
So what's the best way to do it?
So I'm looking at Fino's draws and trying to figure it out. I'm thinking Ahmet, Bwansomni. Those feel like the big ones to me.
What's the most efficient way to do this? My instinct just says play Loti.
I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, Priest is not contesting your units. Nope. It's just not the way that class works. Right now, anyway, the builds of it. Just hit the Pyro, hit the Northshire.
Just take the double value trade.
I think he's debated the Starfall quite heavily with himself.
From the school of thought of spend your mana, play your cards.
And Fino, I think, is about to find himself in a heal pass turn, which will lead to an all-in turn, which will lead to this War Druid Lodi. That pretty much holds everything at bay.
I must consider.
Fino just briefly considers the merits of making his all-in turn right there, but he's just staring right back at that poisonous minion.
So for Bunnyhoppor, this is pretty easily solvable from this state, I think.
Is there any 5 or 3 drop minion that makes things go badly
Horribly
for you
backfires.
Here? Yeah.
Generous Mummy? Thinking like a chain of Northshire Cleric nonsense.
Okay. Thinking more like a thing that deals you 6 damage.
Yeah, like Mortuary Machine. I'm trying to pick like some of the things that are just like, it feels like it could work superbly bad against
Is
you.
is Mortuary Machine a 5 mana 8/8?
Yes.
Okay, I think that's actually a good enough reason that I'm now convinced.
Scenarios also just looks good enough.
Yeah.
And that Ahmet is, it is not nearly as strong in the face of this.
Facing down 24 on the following turn. He is dead. Bunny picks up a big, big victory. He's pushing himself back to the top of that division, keeping pace with Yala, taking his seat back on the top of the Division B, the division that people are calling the tougher of the 2 divisions. So I mean that as no discredit to the players in Division A. Fino, unfortunately, is not able to capitalize on that opportunity, but it is good news if you are Psycho fans, because it means that he does not lose ground on Fino, and it is more and more now starting to feel like a two-horse race between those two players.
Indeed it is. 4 matches left for each of them, and for 4 matches left for Jarla and Bunnyhoppor as well. Bunnyhoppor secures an 8-2 match score now. And Jarla and Bunnyhoppor are putting themselves in the race now. I mean, they're chasing down Hunter Ace even for the #1 spot in all of Grandmasters for Europe at this point. I mean, I just got to say, it feels like Bunnyhopper's just looked fantastic in his series.
Much more to add.
Well, let's add Bunnyhoppor then. Bunnyhoppor, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Indeed, I can. We had a hiccup in the middle of that series, but we eventually caught back up to it and got down to this spot. I want to ask about the lineup. I know there's one more match to take place, but I want you to talk to me about this, how it got built, and what your take is on it. Have you heard the comments from Boar about what he said about the lineup and how it pans out?
No, but I'd be interested to hear what he says.
Sottle?
So, Boar argues that we've been explaining this is a favored lineup for you guys against the decks that you're playing against, right? And that the Elysiana changes things. You don't end up protecting your priest, you protect the warrior. Boar argues that isn't so much the case because you still, for example, you won a bad matchup there with Druid versus Priest. That's not supposed to happen. And that a lot of the time it comes down to Holy Wrath Paladin versus Druid, which not necessarily everyone agrees on who's favored on. And I guess that's the big point of contention in the series. But generally, we're just more interested in your thoughts right now.
So yeah, you can agree on that, disagree on that matchup, but I think the way that we built the Druid this time, it's favored for the Druid, and I lost that series myself against Jarla, the Druid versus Paladin, but I threw that game away, honestly. I had that locked up with the amount of card draw that I had, and I hadn't been in that situation before, and I threw it away. I think overall, if you have double Ferocious Howl and an aggressive list like we do, the Druid should be favored at least 65% or 60. Let's say 60 for the sake of argument. And then I think we should be favored in the series because we have to, we have a warrior which I think has 3 favorable matchups, and then we have a Druid which has at worst a 60% matchup, after it loses to Priest, if it does so.
And so just to clarify, the goal is to get to Game 3 advantage, Druid versus Paladin specifically.
Yeah, against their lineup specifically. And it just depends on picks and bans sometimes. If the picks and bans go differently, then, for example, we could be queuing up a Shaman or something like that. Or, if you feel... if you have, a read on your opponent playing something else, Game 2, for example, or Game 3, then you can bring your Shaman in. But that is a general strategy.
Gotcha.
I think the Casey Boar match is already on its way, so I shouldn't be giving away too much because they shouldn't be watching the stream.
Yeah, fine. The delay's fine.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, obviously we had some technical difficulties in the middle there with the EU server issues. Does that stuff affect you at all? Do you get frustrated with the delays, or is it just business as usual?
I mean, I'm always nervous. I'm still nervous. I'm nervous in front of every series. I'm nervous before. I'm nervous at the start. I know people complain about me roping turn 1 and stuff like that, but I personally kind of need that just to calm down, because even though I've been on this stage so many times and I played GM so many times, I still get nervous every single time. I don't know how other people deal with their nerves, but yeah, I was pretty afraid because I don't know, I had an issue last season and I was not super happy with how that turned out. And then this time I was like, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do. Please don't please don't give Fino a free win, because I wanted to win the series, and I feel the game quits on me and says, Hearthstone game recorded, please restart, and then I can't log back on, and I'm like, no, please.
I want to talk a little bit about the nerves. I'm quite interested to hear that from you, because you look typically very composed. Does it affect you in the past as much as it does now? Or what's the difference between those two, and how have you managed to weather that storm?
When I play the game, I'm mostly I focus on the game enough to not be thinking about my nerves anymore. The only real time where I got completely wrecked by nerves is Game 1 like in the World Championship, I made so many blunders that I looked back at games and I was like, I just could put my head in my hands, and I was like the bigger the stage gets, the bigger the nerves get. So for GM, it's fine because I can focus on the game enough that I don't overthink it. But like in the World Championship, game 1 against Viper happened to me. I made a mistake I would never make in practice matches. I practiced the matchup 15 times, never made that mistake, and then I just make it on the big stage, and I'm like, what's wrong with me?
Can confirm. We were all sat in the caster room when that play happened. We were like, okay, who's playing? Because it's not Bunnyhoppor right now. Like, Bunnyhoppor doesn't make that mistake. What's going on?
I tried to comfort
yeah.
I was like, that's not that bad. It's not that bad.
It was pretty bad.
Your record's looking pretty good, though. I mean, I'll tell you what's wrong with you. Nothing. You're 8-2 right now. Like that.
Like
you gotta
GM,
take away some good stuff,
game,
right?
I feel fine, but I still get nervous, right? And then breaks like this just get me hyped up. That's just it.
I think it's cool to hear that someone with as much of a performance as you've had and as much success you had still gets nervous when they're playing in these games. Bunnyhoppor, I think it's really cool to see. You're standing 8-2 atop with Jarla right now, and we got to let you go, but it's always good to hear from you, and I'm looking forward to seeing your matches next week.
Thank you.